Ashley, hi, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you because we randomly met on LinkedIn. Well, I don't know how random, but I reached out to you because I was really impressed with your profile. And I feel we have so many synergies, and I cannot wait for the audience to hear this conversation because I think the work that you do within the career development and kind of talent development realm is so relevant for everybody. So, and especially the audience that listens to these podcasts. So welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So give us a little bit of a snapshot about kind of who you are, what's your career background? You've had some nice, interesting experience before you dove into entrepreneurship. So give us a little bit of overview.
Yeah, happy to give a little bit of an overview there. So from a young age, I will just kind of start there. From a young age, I saw my parents both be sort of miserable in their jobs, and I kind of had this perception from when I was really young that the workforce was just something that you would dread, something that you didn't look forward to every day. And I actually really didn't want to become an adult as a result of seeing that. And I think I had this curiosity around how we chose our career paths since I was very young. And so I think that curiosity really showed up in college when I started asking my peers, what are you studying? Why are you studying that? What do you hope to do with that after graduation? And I would always get some pretty similar and striking, results and feedback from those questions that I would ask. And a lot of it was just kind of blank stares, or, I think my parents said this is going to make me a lot of money someday, or my parents said it's going to be a steady job. But it kind of became clear to me, and I had this aha moment in college where it made sense for why so many adults were disengaged in their jobs and kind of not looking forward to going to work every day. And it's because we kind of approach our careers very unintentionally. And that really starts in our education pathways. And so I was like, there has to be a solution out there for this. There has to be some form of a resource, or there's no way they're going to let us graduate without having a really concrete plan as to what we're going to do. I was very obviously disappointed that doesn't really exist. And so I said to myself, I will, come up with a solution here. And so I ended up starting a startup back when I was in college. And I ended up actually pitching it to Gallup, the polling organization. And I actually pitched it as sort of a partnership to start off with. I sent a cold email to actually one of the executives there. And I said, hey, I have this idea for a startup, and I think it aligns with a lot of the work that you're doing. And I'd love to, talk to you about it. Instead of partnering with me, they ended up actually hiring me full time out of college. And so a lot of those ideas that I was working on for the startup ended up going into the product team, and now is in Gallup's consulting framework that they use for higher education institutions. But it was such a great launch pad for my career because it allowed me to be in this space where I'm just learning so much around, engagement and just how people make decisions around their career paths. And since then, I worked at a couple of organizations and am now the co-founder of an organization called Mission Collaborative, where we help working professionals kind of figure out what comes next in their career path. So whether you're burnt out, you're frustrated, you're disengaged, whatever it may be, we kind of walk you through what are the possibilities, kind of given your strengths, given your skill set, and what actually would make you excited in this next chapter of your life. Because when it comes to career decision making, you don't do it once in your entire life, right? You do it multiple times. And the sad fact is that no one really teaches you how to do that. So that's really where we step in. And it's just been such a fulfilling career so far.
Hey you, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to share it with friends and family who might find it interesting. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well to stay up to date on weekly new videos that are going to be coming out with some awesome guests that I bring on. And if you have any questions, use the comment section to ask me questions, to interact. I look forward to talking to you. Listen, sounds amazing. And I very much relate to everything that you're saying. And I appreciate that you found this you realized this earlier on. It took me way later until I was like really working, and I couldn't, I've changed so many jobs that it's embarrassing to even state, but when I realized that there's an issue is after I was like, I didn't want to keep doing jobs I didn't enjoy. And I was like, this cannot be my life. I cannot just, this cannot be it. This cannot be why we're here, right? And then I started to realize some of the things that you're mentioning. So, but in college, I was that person. I was like, I had that blank stare. I was like, I have no idea. I'm just going to try some things, but I have no idea, because you are absolutely right. There's not that service that is available. And I love the term you used. You said we're unintentional about our careers. And I think it's so spot on. And as I was saying in the beginning of this, I feel it's relevant for everybody, because no matter where you are as a fresh graduate, as somebody who is changing careers, maybe a senior executive even, it's very similar challenges that we all go through. So really, honestly, awesome job to you for thinking of this way earlier, and also working with Gallup, which is amazing, because they're some of the top companies when it comes to research and workforce development, workforce and engagement, and these sort of things. So talk to me a little bit about so there's many challenges within everything we're talking about, but what do you feel is the root cause, I guess, of this, us not being intentional, us being disengaged as just people around the world? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that really comes to mind is just lack of exposure to different. If I had to put you on the spot.
I lost you for a second, but you're back. Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Perfect. If I had to kind of put you on the spot here, and I had to kind of ask you, name as many occupation titles as you could in under 60 seconds, I would guess that you can probably only name a handful of those titles. And that's actually true for a lot of people. And what's really sad is that there are just so many different career paths out there that I think we are not exposed to, particularly at a young age, but also as you even go throughout your career path. So if you don't really know what options are out there, how can you actually, figure out what's going to be fulfilling to you if you have no true idea as to this is even a career path? And so I think that's the first thing there. But I think in addition to that, I think we also kind of just go through the motions in terms of, we go to college and then we're supposed to get a good job after, graduation. And I think oftentimes we don't take a step back and say, what do I really actually want to create in this world? What sort of impact do I really want to have? And instead of approaching it through, I can only do this through one particular career path or through this major, I think we can oftentimes get, kind of narrow-sighted in that. And so I think taking a broader approach to just how you think about how you show up in terms of your career and just your work more broadly, I think is also really important as well. So your career isn't your just defining title, right? That's not the only thing that you are. You can, have impact in all the other things that you're involved in. And it's not just the first job that you get out of college is going to be kind of your end all be all. There's just so much more out there.
Absolutely. And I love the how you pointed to exposure, because that's where it's at. I completely agree. And I was actually having a conversation this morning with somebody. I posted something about how you should kind of, the things that are learned through podcasting, like you get to learn so many things because you talk to so many different people, and just the exposure and the expansion of your mindset. And they said, well, but should we really listen to other people? And I said, the point is not to listen and follow what other people say. The point is to collect as much data as possible and then make an educated choice that's right for you. And one of the things that came out of the conversation is just simple awareness. And I've been there as well. I'm sure you have. We all have, which is why conversations are important. When you want to change a job, for example, and if you're talking to people that have never gone through career change, or they themselves are afraid of career change or trying something new, they're going to give you the advice that they would give themselves, which is, hey, stay put in your current job, etc. Right? Or if you're starting a business, you're not going to go to a person who works in a corporate job, because they will never understand. They will never relate. It's very difficult to relate. As high as you are, as determined as you are as an individual, corporate entrepreneurship, different worlds. And so you cannot go to a corporate person and ask for advice within that space. So, but it's important to also maybe hear that perspective. But again, you have to diversify, because there are a lot of people that are doing amazing things, that are monetizing, that are doing things they enjoy. And this is my push always with people. I'm like, there is a way to do something you enjoy that doesn't drain you, and you can still make money from it. Like, it's just about, it exists in this world. It exists, whatever it is, but it's actually finding that thing. And the way you start is by getting that exposure. So question to you is, I guess, through some of the programs and interactions that you have with your audience, what are some, I guess, basic ways that people can start getting that exposure? Let's say, especially introverts or people that just don't know where to start. What do you recommend usually?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, before I answer that question, I wanted to touch on something that you said I think is so important. And I think it's really worth emphasizing. And that's to audit the advice that you get, because not all advice that you receive is good advice. And so, like you said, if you're getting advice around a career change from somebody who's doing a particular career that you have no interest in doing, then that advice isn't really going to align with what's actually, good for you. So it's so important to sit down and actually audit, where this information is coming from and make sure it actually aligns with what you want for your broader career. So to answer your question around kind of how do we expose ourselves to more, career paths and just kind of things out there, there is just obviously so much that you can find on the internet, honestly, by just knowing kind of how to search. So I would say if you're a career changer, one interesting thing that you can do, it's pretty easy and straightforward. You can just type in alternative career paths for, and then you insert the title that you have right now. You'd be really amazed at how many folks have written about this, how many, individuals have probably done that in the past, and who want to kind of provide that insight and that, advice as to how to get out of that particular career path into something new. I think another thing also to mention too is, we actually don't really think about our careers until we're in a place of wanting to change them, or something is going really well, or something is going really poorly. And so I think kind of checking in with yourself on a weekly basis and just kind of open to the fact that there are people out there doing careers that you just may not be thinking about because your mind on autopilot when you're just kind of moving about your life through a normal week. I think if you kind of tune into, oh, interesting, this person does this career path, or you're scrolling through LinkedIn and you see somebody's title that you've never heard of before, I encourage you to explore that, even if you have no interest in going into that particular career or industry. Oftentimes industries kind of are set up in a very similar way. So even if you don't want to go into, the financial industry, for example, there are probably similar roles and tasks that you would have to complete that could be applicable across another industry that you might be good at. So I would say keep your mind open and just know that there are just so many different career paths out there, just kind of waiting for you to discover. And, even when you're having conversations with somebody or randomly talking to a stranger, I think it's always important to just kind of listen to how they talk about their career and ask them what career they do have.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, again, with the access to information we have today, right, and just being curious is enough to just, like I said, just start with basic Google search, and then go from there. Reach out to people on LinkedIn. So it's but you know what happened, you mentioned something interesting, is that it's true. It's only when something happens in our careers where you're like, oh my God, I now have a new boss and now I really don't like this. And all of a sudden we wake up and you're like, so it's like, well, why haven't you thought about it? It's about being intentional, and to be intentional, to make time, right, to have these thoughts, maybe if not once a week, once a month, once a quarter, I don't know, but like literally set it for yourself. And I fall into this trap. I mean, I talk about these things and I fall into a trap of like focus of like, okay, where are we taking this whole journey, right? And that intent is very important. And I mean, again, I practice these things and I still forget, and I'm sure you do too, like we all, because we get busy and we get caught up in different projects, and then you're like, what happened? The 6 months went by, like, what am I doing? So I think that's important. And it's always like when something bad happens, that's when we want to make a change. It's like same thing with like our health. Like, okay, when my doctor tells you you're gonna have a heart attack if you don't change it, that's when we make a change, right? So right. And I think just proactivity, if I were to take a theme out of what you were saying, it's just being intentional and proactive with
Absolutely.
Your career, right?
And I think it's important to think about this stuff when you're not in a place of kind of in the scarcity mindset, right? So if you are looking for a new job, you're in somewhat of a scarcity mindset and you have to take what is available to you at that time. So to get really tactical, if you are somebody who may be, comfortable with where you are right now, but maybe know that you probably want to make a change in the next 1 to 2 years, what I would encourage you to do is start looking at organizations that you might ideally want to work at, that you find compelling, that you think that they're doing great work, and kind of make this short list of that, those organizations, and then start to build relationships with people who work there. And by doing that, you can start to, number one, just understand how those organizations work, what jobs are potentially available to you, even if there are no current openings. But then most importantly, you're starting to build relationships with those individuals. And so when you do want to switch jobs or change careers, then you've already forged that relationship, and you will be a much more compelling candidate because you have an insider inside the organization who can vouch for you. And that's particularly important if you have a non-traditional background, for example. You want somebody to, put their stamp of approval on you and say, hey, this is somebody I would really vouch for and I really want in this organization. So again, taking that proactive approach gets you out of that sort of scarcity mindset and only kind of taking what's available to you when you need it most.
And and I feel we can spend hours just on this topic alone, but I want to shift a little bit towards you as an entrepreneur. So I can very much relate in terms of, I'm sure it's a roller coaster of things, but what I guess has sparked your interest to say, I'm going to leave a company like Gallup, and I'm going to start something else on the side, right? So I know you had this entrepreneurship kind of bug before you even joined Gallup, but then when you were there, what kind of pushed you to say, no, I really want to go back to entrepreneurship. I really want to do something else. What was it, something specific?
That's such a good question to kind of boil that down to one specific thing. It's quite difficult, but I think the thing that has been really clear for me my entire life is that I am more likely to bet on myself for success versus betting on a system to bring me success and fulfillment. Because I did see my parents, struggle with kind of following the path that you're supposed to follow and end up being miserable and not happy. And so I think from this young age, I had this mindset of, okay, if I really want to be happy and successful in my own career, then I'm going to have to take a bet on myself. And what that means is I have to play to my natural strengths, and that those strengths happen to not necessarily be the best strengths for a classroom setting or a more traditional career path. It's so interesting because I have a brother who's a doctor, and so he's very successful by the traditional standards. And I always had him as kind of a foil to me because I was like, you know what, I'm not like him. I don't think that way. I am a nonconformist thinker. I think kind of outside the box. And so then I kind of had to just get really honest with myself and say, I think your best bet here is to do something that follows your natural strengths, and that's coming up with ideas, that's executing on those ideas. And it's also relationship building too. I love building relationships. I am such a people person. And so I knew that grades were never going to fulfill me in that way. I knew I was really good at building relationships, and that's kind of how it started. And it's only, it's only been affirmed for me throughout my career that this is truly the path for me.
Mm-hmm. And it shows, and this is what I love about having people like you on the show, is because it shows, the passion shows, you're interested, you care, you genuinely care. When we first connected on your LinkedIn, the activity on your LinkedIn, like I recommend highly people to follow you because it's like you're always posting really relevant career tips, like things that I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think about it that way. Nice one, Ashley. It's like, I'm continuously learning from you as well. So that's awesome. And yeah, I agree. I think that at the end of the day, I'm a true believer we can create our own career paths. And it's becoming more and more obvious that companies are not always going to offer us this cushiony, soft, and comfortable and safe working spaces, and that everybody's replaceable essentially, and that you're not really guaranteed, and yet you're limited when you're working at a company, especially in the big corporates. You're limited in terms of hobbies that you can pursue, like doing different things, because there's communication issues. And so there's a lot of kind of obstacles within that space as well. And if you can do it on your own, why not, right? And it's as hard as it is, the reward is even more than you can imagine. So and it's just fulfilling at the end of the day. So it's so yeah, definitely. Is there, so especially in the world of talent development, career transitions for people, there's a lot of new information that continuously comes out. So how do you stay on top of all of that? Like, what is your, like, as an entrepreneur, right? Because you have to do a lot of things on your own. You have to learn, you have to source information. What are some things that you do yourself that is helpful to you in your journey?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's one of those things that it's very, individual to who you are. I know I'm somebody who learns through relationships. And so I have been very intentional about creating a community around me of people who are slightly ahead of me at whatever it is in life, whether that's, professionally speaking, or if there's a particular skill that I'm looking to acquire. I learn best through kind of learning through those relationships, through imitating, figuring out what they did really well, what didn't work, and kind of learning from that particular relationship. That's obviously kind of different in terms of kind of managing all the sea of information, but I also think it's really important that you lean into your natural sort of learning style. And so I think that's kind of the first and foremost thing that I do. And then, I guess in addition to that, following people on particular social media channels who think the way that you do, who are, again, a little bit ahead of you in terms of their career or wherever you're trying to go professionally or personally, because their perspective is so important to kind of how you shape, your next steps and your next move. And so I think that those are the two most important things. But I think in addition to that is also making sure that you set up time to decompress and to turn your brain off. I have struggled with that in the past, just being able to actually sit down and quiet my brain, because if you don't take the time to do that, then you'll never be able to take in all the information that's out there. So it is so important to build in breaks to your workday, to take that time to recharge. And it's ultimately going to pay off in dividends, versus you trying to just, go all the way through and not take any breaks throughout the day and overwork yourself.
Mm. No, absolutely. I think we all need those moments of peace from time to time. And so in addition to kind of creating those space of, to just kind of not think about things for a while, what are some other habits or routines that you have as an entrepreneur to be able to manage all the stressors that come at you, all the ups and downs? Is there anything else that you stick with like religiously every day?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I'm a big believer in the StrengthsFinder assessment. So if you haven't taken it, it's a Gallup product. I highly recommend you taking it. My number 2 strength is discipline. And so essentially what that means to me is that I rely on my routines for success. And so anything that I can do to kind of put my brain in autopilot once I've optimized a specific routine, then I have kind of, given myself more space in my brain to figure out that problem that I'm working on throughout that day. So my mornings look very, very regimented. I wake up, I meditate for 10 minutes, journal kind of what my intentions are for that day, make breakfast, and then I do something physical to kind of get my body moving and my brain moving as well. And so I think having those routines and being able to figure out, okay, what is the most productive way to accomplish this task that I know I just have to do every day, but it drains me. I think that's really important to kind of audit all those tasks that you do and optimize them, and then kind of automate them, or try to, let your brain go on autopilot when you do complete those tasks. So then you do have more space in your brain to, again, solve other problems or work through other things that you have going on that day.
Yeah, and I ask this question to everybody, and it's always very similar answers. And the reason I ask this question is because oftentimes we look for these magic formulas and magic pills of how to be productive or our best. And like, it really just comes down to like taking a moment for yourself, moving first thing in the morning, journaling, kind of quieting down your mind, because that is when your mind is not overwhelmed by all these things coming at you. And it's very similar answers that I get every time. And I always wrote about it recently. I said, it's just going back to the basics, and we forget that, and just knowing yourself. So I think it's good stuff. And I love it that you bring up Gallup, because I'm a huge fan of Gallup as well. And I love their assessments. I love their research. I think it's probably one of the better comprehensive ones that are out there. So that's good. I love them. They're getting shout outs this whole podcast. So go Gallup. So anyway, but let's go back to, I want to talk to you a little bit about career change seekers. So we've spoken a little bit about kind of being curious and getting to know people, but what do you see as the biggest challenge career change seekers face right now, just from your conversations?
Yeah, I use the word limiting beliefs, and what that looks like is those are sort of those kind of patterns of thinking and feeling that you have around your own abilities that prevent you from making a change, or even as small as taking an action, such as reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn, because in your mind you're thinking, oh, this person doesn't want to hear from me, or I'm not good enough to get their attention. So limiting beliefs show up all the time in everything that we do, particularly when it comes to changing your career. They are very, very oftentimes very loud, and they prevent you from actually being able to sit down and think clearly and actually evaluate what is possible for me in my career path. We've worked with thousands of career changers at this point, and it always goes back to these beliefs that they have at the beginning. And so we have this exercise where we have all of our participants journal out all the beliefs that you have, try to figure out where those beliefs came from, right? It could have been something that a parent told you, that you were not a good communicator or something like that. I'm making up an example here. And that has kind of stuck with you throughout your life. And so you have to work to start to reframe those beliefs and reframe those sort of habits of thinking, because there's oftentimes no real definitive proof that that is going to prevent you from moving to a new career path. And so it's oftentimes just quieting your brain down and trying to figure out what is actually preventing me from taking that next step. So again, thinking about if you're hesitating to send this LinkedIn message, why are you really hesitating to send that? Get to the core root of the thing that is creating this sort of analysis paralysis state where you're not able to make any action. Or on the flip side, if you're doing overaction without a lot of intention and you're kind of going all over the place, stop to kind of ask, why are you doing that? And oftentimes they always come back to limiting beliefs. And so give yourself some time as well to really process what those limiting beliefs are, because they're oftentimes very deep rooted in, again, childhood and all the things that we have acquired throughout our lives. But that's truly what I see in terms of kind of being the biggest barrier to career change. Oftentimes people think that they don't have transferable skills. And it amazes me, because if you actually sat down and compared your job description to the job description that you're trying to go after, they're pretty much saying almost the same thing a lot of times, but using different words to describe them. So I think that's oftentimes how also limiting beliefs will show up too, is I don't have these transferable skills that this job is asking me to have. And that's just, again, not true. It's all about kind of reframing what is actually being said here, what's actually happening under the surface here that doesn't really feel obvious to me when I first look at this, but upon further reflection, I have some clarity on this. And I actually just realized that this is preventing me from maybe being vulnerable or preventing me from rejection.
Yeah, and I love the point about job description, because I always say first of all, they're very ineffective way to recruit somebody, I guess. And it really rarely means something, and you rarely end up doing exactly that thing. It's usually something else. But I always tell people as well, like, to find what's the problem that they're trying to solve and how can you solve that problem. And then the chances are that, unless it's something very technical, if we're talking about different kind of general fields like marketing, business development, sales, etc., like a lot of those transferable skills that can be used no matter where you are. If it doesn't require specific technical skills, so to say, it's likely that a lot of people can fit into that description, which is why recruitment is such a difficult thing. And then on top of that, you then have other jumps, hoops to jump through, which is the automated systems where you just submit your CV, it just goes away and never is seen by the human eye. So yeah, and I think just you mentioned like reaching out to people on LinkedIn and messaging is so important, and it's such a missed step in job search in general, just building those relationships. And so I speak quite a bit about it, so I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because it is a point that needs to be emphasized. It's just, and limiting beliefs is a thing. Have you found that well, this is actually an interesting question. We know that typically the older you get, the harder it is to make a change, right? Because limiting beliefs are even more set into your mind. So you're lived with them longer, essentially. Do you see a difference between men and women in your work? Are men more likely to kind of not have those limiting beliefs, but then maybe they have the more stronger ego that stops them from approaching to kind of asking for opportunities, or not asking, but inquiring about opportunities? Or like, do you see any difference in that? I'm just curious.
That's such a good question. On average, I would say it pretty much evens out, and perhaps that's just the population that we work with. A lot of times people show up in our program when they have kind of exhausted all possibilities. And so every person kind of comes in at this state of, I just really, really need help. And so I don't really find that there is much of a difference in terms of male versus female. I do think in general, the kind of the stereotype that women can often limit themselves from the job opportunities if they don't meet all the qualifications. There have been so many studies on that women won't apply to a job if they don't meet, X amount of, qualifications on the job description, but men will. I do think those are sort of general, true trends that you see, but I actually don't really think that more women have more limiting beliefs than men. I think they're oftentimes there. It's just about how do they show up and how do they come out. And so that's kind of what we have seen across the board with our programs, at least.
Yeah, and it's because something I wonder about, because I mean, there's a lot of studies, but I'm curious, like how much of it is really true, like in practice, or is it just we're all at the end of the day just human? We have our own insecurities and our own kind of limitations and etc. Right? So because I think that also the fact that sometimes these studies come out, it also makes you feel like as a woman, you're like, oh, okay, so maybe I should limit myself because I'm not alone in this, but maybe it's not the reality. So, but yeah, so it's interesting. So, and then when you are, I guess, when people come to you, like, how do you help them, I guess, overcome the fear? Because I feel like the root cause of career change reaching out to is really the fear. Would you agree that it just comes down to fear of failure, fear of, I don't know, some kind of embarrassment?
Yep. Yeah, I think that's valid, right? And I think the fear is always tied to those limiting beliefs. And oftentimes, again, like I said, limiting beliefs are there to prevent you from feeling rejected, from being embarrassed, to just kind of help you kind of navigate the world. Sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not though. And particularly in career change, it's not. So in order to kind of help people understand that they actually are a strong candidate for a particular career path, we actually have them do something called a test project. And so this is actually not something that's novel or kind of out there. It's pretty straightforward when you actually kind of boil it down to the essential components of it. A test project is essentially, if I wanted to become a graphic designer, for example, I would say, okay, great. I'm going to try to figure out, what does a graphic designer do? What's a reasonable project that I would do as a graphic designer? And I'm going to make this project relatively short. It's something I can complete, a couple of hours on a weekend. And by the end of this, I'm going to have a really good sense for, number one, whether or not I really liked doing that task and that responsibility in that career path. And then two, I'm going to take this to a practitioner who's already in that space and ask for some feedback to actually see if I'm a compelling candidate in that space. And so by having them actually sit down and do something that they would be required to do in the career path that they're thinking about, it helps them get out of their head and into action. And oftentimes they sit there and they complete these test projects and they're like, oh my gosh, I could do this. And I told myself that I couldn't do this all along, when in reality, I just needed to sit down and mock up a logo of a company and just redesign it in a new way. And, there you go. I know I have these skills, and it's, this kind of redesigned logo is proof of that. And especially after I hear from a graphic designer who is a practitioner in the space, kind of say, yeah, you're on the right track, then that is validation from not only, from the external sources who are in that space, who know that career particularly well, but then also for you, it provides you with that confidence that you can do this job, and two, you would enjoy it. And those things are so important when it comes to the interview, because I can't tell you how many times I've worked with participants, and honestly, I have been there too, where you've gone into an interview and you kind of had to fake the enthusiasm because you weren't really sure what the role was about. And so it comes through. The interviewers can really pick up on that, and typically. But if you do it in this way, if you do this test project, you show up in a much more compelling way, because you're actually confident that not only can you do this job, but you are actually excited about it. And you want to do that with that particular organization. So it honestly just makes the entire process for everyone better, because again, you have that confidence and that clarity that this is something that you can do and you'd be good at.
And that's a very practical way to test something out. But also on the flip side, what it can show you is maybe that's not what you want to do. And that's equally as powerful. so you don't really waste your time on it or make a huge career change based on what you thought might be interesting. Because I love those little experiment testing grounds. So I think that's very powerful, and I hope the audience is taking notes, because I think you're just throwing so many gems and like very practical ways to just accelerate career or change career. And it's again, I'm just completely stunned that we don't talk about this in universities. And sure, there's some talk. So I know I'm very pessimistic when it comes to career offerings at universities, but there's very limited discussion about these kind of things. It's more of like, well, you should pursue this major and do this and etc. And we shouldn't get to a point where at mid-level of our career, it's the first time we're thinking about what's right for us, or we're so worried about, this has to be the right job, right? So that's another fear a lot of people have, especially fresh graduates. They're like, oh my God, I need to choose this perfect career. I'm like, no, you don't. Choose something for a year or 2 years. It's even at mid-level, like, again, like, yes, we all have responsibilities, and it's just, I think the reality in what you said a few times is the limiting beliefs, is that we limit ourselves about the fact that, oh, what if I only stay here for a year or 2 years, it's going to look bad on my CV. I'm like, but you just look at different ways how you make sure that it doesn't look bad. How do you make sure that you be proactive in other ways to sustain yourself, right? Like, do you see that do you see that there's a discussion around that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with this idea that we have to figure out this perfect solution or this perfect career path out there. And if we didn't find it at your first job, you need to keep searching for it for your entire career. First and foremost, that ideal perfect career path out there, that's something that's just kind of waiting for you, doesn't honestly probably exist. I think there are so many different ways that you can find fulfillment, and those sort of criteria that will lead you to fulfillment will change throughout your life. So what's going to be fulfilling for you at 25 is going to look very different from what's going to look fulfilling for you at 45. And so I think instead of thinking of our careers as a sort of linear track that we're on, I always like to talk about this concept of career portfolios. I can't take credit for this idea. I love this. There are a lot of people that talk about career portfolios. Really, it's sort of, we need to start thinking about our careers as sort of a culmination of all the experiences that we've had, both in professional settings and in non-professional settings, that kind of make us who we are and how we show up in the world. And it's less about connecting those dots in a perfect way to an employer and saying, this is why I'm a perfect candidate, because I've checked all these boxes that I should have. Instead, it's about telling your story. It's about connecting all of those past experiences that have led you to where you are today, and also will make you a much more compelling candidate because you have probably seen some more diverse experiences outside of just what somebody's, did for their entire career if they stayed in one particular industry. Diversity of thought, diversity of experience is so important. And I think we need to encourage each other to lean into those things more and be okay with talking about those in an interview, instead of just thinking in our heads, wow, if I didn't have all of these, particular boxes checked that, would lead me to a good candidate, then I shouldn't even interview here. I think you're writing yourself off too early. So instead of thinking again as your career as your kind of this linear path, think of it as a portfolio. And your portfolio is going to have a bunch of experiences, and it's more about branding and talking about your story versus making sure that every single, skill that you need to acquire for this particular job is checked.
Yeah, that's spot on. Listen, Ashley, where can people follow you for more tips, and just where do you hang out on social media? Where can they find your programs? Can you give us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say LinkedIn is probably the best place to follow, some of my tips and insights. I post there pretty regularly. And in terms of kind of programs, if you want some more hands-on experience with this, or if you want to just honestly learn the process of career design, because again, as I mentioned, it's something that you should probably learn as a skill because you'll have to do it at some point in time in your career. If you are interested in doing one of our programs, it's 30 days. It's only a couple of hours a week. You can go to missioncollaborative.com, and we have a public program that's actually starting in May. If you're interested in that, we also partner with over 45, I believe, alumni institutions in the United States. So we may actually have a particular program that is designated for, your alumni of the particular institution that you went to. So I would say those are the two best places to go to kind of get more information. The other thing I'll mention too is I'm actually in the process of writing a book about career design, and the expected publication date.
I was gonna say, I was like, this should be a book. I was like, I have to mention this. I'm so glad. I'm so glad this is coming.
I'm glad we were thinking about the same thing. So yeah, I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now, and the expected publication date is in September of this upcoming year. And Amazing. It's all about kind of career design. It talks about the framework that we talk about, that so many, thousands of career changers that have gone through and have had success with in our program, but also weaving in some of those really important stories that I have had the privilege to hear about as a result of creating this program. And I honestly just feel like I would be doing the world a disservice if I didn't share these insights from people who have, been in the same career for 30 years, and they are saying, I just regret this so much. I don't want anybody else to feel this way. And so all of those kind of insights are going to be packed into this book. I'm so excited about it. So again, follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll kind of keep up to date with all the updates there.
Awesome. This is awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's you have to put all this stuff in a book. More people need to hear about this, and I'll be the first one to get it. So make sure you send me. Let me pre-register.
Yes, absolutely.
So Ashley, thank you so much for taking the time, and it was super valuable. I learn from you every time I speak with you, every time I follow you on social media, on LinkedIn in particular. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your knowledge, and I can't wait to see further impact you're going to make, because I think the things you're talking about needs to be heard by more and more people, because as you and I know, there's a lot of people that are in situations that this could really add value. So
yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I appreciate the kind words, and likewise to you. I always learn so much chatting with you, and just excited for our continued conversations. And if you felt inspired by anything in this podcast, or if you have questions about your career in particular, I am more than happy to answer them directly. If you shoot me a direct message on LinkedIn and you're like, hey, Ashley, I have this thing, can you help me think it through? I love brainstorming. So please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to talk things through with you.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all the links in the description of this podcast. So reach out. Thanks again.